April showers bring big bass up shallow. Now, I know that's not the exact saying that we hear a lot for the month of April, but to me, the best month of the year to catch a lot of big fish in shallow water is the month of April. Now, depending on where you live in the country, you're going to be typically dealing with bass that are kind of in this pre-spawn to spawning phase, meaning these fish are feeding up, they are pushing up shallow, and they are readily accessible to us anglers to catch. And the best thing is that in the month of April, you can do a lot of power fishing. And in this video, I'm going to go over the top 5 lures, the ones that I have with me all the time in the boat or banked fishing that can help me to catch big bass in April. So stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. This video is brought to you by Omnia Tackle. Omnia is the place that I like to shop for all of my tackle. They have a humongous selection of lures and they always seem to have some sort of good deal going on. Omnia also has a pro app that has some great features, including topo maps for over 44,000 lakes across the US with 1-foot contour line. This app also has a lot of fishing reports for the lakes that you like to fish. So not only can you get your fishing tackle at Omnia, but it is just a great resource for the angler to help you catch more bass. I'm gonna leave a link down below for not only the lures that we're talking about today, but the Omnia app. If you wanna help support this channel, click on those links, shop at Omnia, and download the app today. Now, lure number 1 is a jerkbait. For a lot of anglers, when they think about fishing a jerkbait, I think that they are thinking of really cold water. Now, in the month of April, depending on where you live, you actually may be dealing with really cold water. But to me, no matter where I've gone, if those fish have not yet spawned, I love to fish a jerkbait. It is a great tool to locate fish. And something that I really like about a jerkbait is it just has a big drawing power. I see often with the use of like my Humminbird Mega Live, fish that will come from over 10 feet to eat a jerkbait. So because of the drawing power that it has, it is truly one of the best lures that we have to simply locate bass. And like I said, because bass will come from a distance, you can actually fish a jerkbait in a little bit deeper water than you might think. I have fished a jerkbait a lot in 15, 16, 17 foot of water. And even though that jerkbait is only getting down 5, maybe 7 feet, those fish will come off of the bottom to get a jerkbait. So again, it is a great bait that has a lot of drawing power. Now, one of the most important things about a jerkbait is your cadence of the bait. If you're fishing in really cold water this time of the year, in the month of April, you're gonna wanna make sure you add in some longer pauses to that bait. Now, when I say long pauses, I'm not the guy that's gonna sit there and pause that bait for 15, 20, or 30 seconds like some anglers. I typically let that bait sit for probably maximum about 7 seconds. And usually as I'm letting that bait pause, I'm kind of counting to see when will that bass hit that bait. Sometimes you will see a bass hits it at 4 seconds. Sometimes you'll see a bass hits it at 5 seconds. And then you know exactly how long to pause that bait before you start twitching it down there. Now, as that water temperature starts to warm, for example, if you live in the South and you're dealing with 58-degree water, maybe 62-degree water, this is when I'm gonna start working that jerkbait a little bit faster. But the really important thing is always let the fish tell you what they want, because I've seen sometimes in warmer water, like 60-degree water, they still want a longer pause. I've also seen times where even in cold water, like 48-degree water, they actually want a jerkbait coming a little bit faster. So the best thing you can do is really just experiment with your cadence, and when you start getting bit, try to figure out exactly what it is that triggered the bass to eat. Now, one little side note with a jerkbait, if you are fishing it around a lot of wood cover, it is typically best to use a jerkbait that actually has a little bit bigger bill. Typically, bigger bill jerkbaits actually dive a little bit deeper. But the other thing about a bigger bill jerkbait is it will deflect off a cover like wood a lot better. It helps to keep those hooks away from the wood, and you can fish it a lot better through wood than you can jerkbaits with a smaller bill. Now, lure number 2 is the spinnerbait. A spinnerbait is truly one of the best baits that we have to catch some really quality fish. There are definitely days when you can go out there and you can catch a lot of fish on a spinnerbait, but anymore, I feel like when I get on a good spinnerbait bite, I am putting myself in the prime position to catch some really big fish. Now, like I talked about in the intro of this video, in the month of April, we typically have a lot of rain. You have storms that come through, just a lot of rain in general. And what does that rain do? It will turn a lot of water on some of your favorite lakes pretty murky. You will have some really muddy water. Maybe it'll go from just clear to stained water. And anytime that I am fishing in muddier water, a spinnerbait is by far the best bait to pick up to fish in that muddy water. Now, the reason that the spinnerbait is so good in that muddy water is one, it puts off a lot of vibration. Baits like this one right here that have a single Colorado blade, there is a big thump to that blade as it is coming through the water. So in that mud, those bass are going to use their lateral line to detect those vibrations so they can really hone in on a spinnerbait. The other thing about fishing in muddy water is bass typically get really tight to cover in muddy water. They will be right against a dock post. They will be right against a stump, right in a laydown. And the great thing about spinnerbaits is they come through cover very, very well, especially wood cover. You can knock this bait right up against the wood and it is not going to get hung. So you can put that bait exactly where that fish is. You have a lot of vibration so that fish can hone in on it, and you're gonna be able to catch a lot of fish in the mud. Now, something that I love to do in the month of April, especially when I'm fishing around the pre-spawn, is fish red lures. Well, no matter where I'm fishing across the country, red can be one of the best colors to use in that pre-spawn phase. Now, one thing that I love about a spinnerbait is just the versatility of the bait. Not only can you fish it really shallow in a round cover, but you can also use baits like this one right here. It's a little bit bigger. This is a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait. You can use 1 ounce spinnerbaits, and you can actually slow roll these baits across the bottom. You can fish them out a little bit deeper. So when you have bass that are moving from deeper water to shallow water and you don't know exactly where they are, you can just pick up a spinnerbait, you can fish it everywhere, and you can really pinpoint how those fish are setting up and what depth they are sitting in. Now, lure number 3 is the good old jig and pig, or a jig in a soft plastic trailer. To me, the jig is probably the most consistent big fish lure that we have. You know, I just talked about a spinnerbait being a great big fish bait, and it definitely is, but sometimes you have to have just the right conditions to really have a spinnerbait work. Now, with a jig, there is just a number of conditions where a jig will work. You can fish it when it's bright sunshine and slick water. You can also fish it when it's cloudy and when you have windy conditions. And the thing about a jig, because of its presence, it typically catches some really big fish. Now, to me, there is no doubt that during this kind of pre-spawn to spawn phase that a lot of us are dealing with in the month of April, there are times where you simply need to slow down. The other thing that we have in April is cold fronts. We have a lot of these times where the fish are really starting to move up shallow. They're really starting to get acclimated to the warmer water, and then bam, we have a cold front come through, and a lot of those fish will kind of get lockjaw, where you really have to kind of hit them on the head, or you have to keep a bait in front of them for a long time. And to me, a jig is the perfect bait to do that. I can throw it into a laydown log. I can skip it underneath an overhanging tree. I can fish it in grass. And a lot of times, one of the best things to do with a jig is to dead stick this bait. This is something that you don't hear a lot of anglers talk about. Obviously, I like to work the bait. I like to yo-yo it when it's in cover, but sometimes I just like to pitch a jig out and let it sit on the bottom for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. That's a really long time, but you get the picture. There are just times in the month of April when the bass are gonna be in a foul mood. And sometimes when you just pitch that jig out, you let it sit there, a bass is going to just slowly creep up on that bait, and it's gonna take them a little time, and then they're just going to suck it in. Now, recently, one of my favorite little jig and jig combos is this one right here. This is an Outcast Tackle cage fighter jig. This jig was designed to come through a lot of cover, and it does exactly that. The other thing is this is a tungsten jig. So it's a little bit smaller profile jig, but it also has a really good hook on it. So I can use heavy line. This is 20-pound fluorocarbon line, a 7-foot 6-inch rod. I have a lot of power on a hook set and I don't bend out that rod. Now on the back of that jig, I like this little X-Zone Muscleback Finesse Crawl. This particular soft plastic actually floats. So when you throw that jig out and you're dead sticking that bait, those crawls are actually gonna kind of float upwards, which actually looks a lot like an actual crawfish in the water in a defense mode. So it just looks really natural to a bass, and I feel like I get a lot of bites on this little jig combo right here. Now, lure number 4 is a glide bait. There are a lot of anglers out there who probably are still not confident when fishing a glide bait. And the month of April is probably one of the best months to start gaining confidence in this bait. When you have a lot of fish that are in shallow water and they are seeing a lot of your more traditional lures, this is a bait that you can pick up and catch fish behind people. And not only that, you are going to trigger some of the biggest bass that live in your lakes. Now this particular glide bait I'm holding is a Spro KGB Chad Shad. It's not a huge bait, it's a 7-inch bait. It's only $60, so it's not a really expensive high-end bait. And this particular bait just gets a lot of bites. So anytime I can go out, get a lot of bites on a bait, that's where I start to gain confidence in that bait. So if you guys have not thrown a glide bait yet, I highly suggest doing it in the month of April. Now, one of the most important things to know about a glide bait is that it's not always a bait that you're going to actually catch fish on, but it often is a bait that you can find fish on. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when you are fishing this bait, you know, sometimes the conditions have to be just right. Sometimes you have to have some wind. Sometimes you have to have some sun for a bass to actually commit to this bait. But often what you see is followers. You will bring this bait in, you will get a lot of fish to follow it. And I have used a glide bait as simply a search tool where I will go out, I will specifically find specific bass. Maybe I throw this against a stump and a big bass follows it out from a stump. Or maybe I throw it up against a dock and a big bass follows it from the dock. Although I didn't catch that fish, I know where that fish is. And later in the day, I can come back, I can throw a different bait like a wacky rig and I can catch that exact fish. So even though a glide bait is a great tool to catch big fish, it's also just simply a great tool to find fish. Now, lure number 5 is a crankbait, but more specifically, a hybrid hunter. This particular type of crankbait is a lot different than normal crankbaits that you see out there on the market. As you can see, the bill is a lot different, and this particular bait comes through covers of all types, rocks, grass, wood, extremely well. Now, I did a full video on this particular bait, so I'm not gonna talk a lot about it right here. I'm just gonna link the video right here about the hybrid hunter. So if you guys wanna learn more about this bait and why it's so good in the month of April, you can click on it right here. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.